User checks and formal visual inspection. Welcome to this First Stop Safety video. This video module will outline the basics of user checks and formal visual inspection. We'll look at the purpose of user checks and outline the 5 steps of formal visual inspection. Purpose of user checks. The purpose of performing user checks is to spot the early signs of any danger. As they frequently use the appliance, users are best placed to spot any potential problems. The individual in charge of the PAT testing may not see that particular fault until the next scheduled PAT test, by which time the appliance may have been used several times. For example, let's look at a situation where the cable is nearly pulling out of the plug. There is no immediate danger of shock, as wires are probably still in place. However, there is a possibility for the earth wire pulling out during repeated use of the appliance. This will leave the user with an increased risk of suffering an electric shock. Showing a user how to carry out checks. A poster like this one is a very good way of highlighting the key areas to look out for. This poster shows possible hazards to be aware of in a normal office environment. It is also good practice to introduce this as part of an induction process for new staff or at regular staff meetings. If they do spot a problem, users need to be advised not to use the appliance and to report the fault to a supervisor. The 5 steps of formal visual inspection. A formal visual inspection should be carried out at regular, predetermined intervals and the results recorded. There are 5 easy steps in this process to ensure that the appliance is safe to use. Step 1. Checking the cable. The first step in the formal visual inspection is to check the cable. Check for any signs of damage to the cable. If the cable is coiled up, as with vacuum cleaners or extension cables, it's important that the full length of the wire is checked. The cable must be checked for signs of cuts to the outer and/or inner insulation. Here you can see an example of a damaged cable that will be a danger to the user if they were to touch it. If a cable has non-standard joints, it has to be failed, even if it was covered with insulation tape. With this connection, as there is no strain relief, the wires could be pulled apart, exposing the user to risk of an electric shock. If any taped joints are found, then the tape needs to be taken off and the cable inspected. Insulation tape is no substitute for the manufacturer's insulation. Step 2. Checking the appliance. The second step in the formal visual inspection is to check the appliance itself. First of all, check the appliance for any obvious signs of damage. An appliance that rattles when shaken may have loose parts inside and would need to be failed. Check for signs of overheating. Here you can see an appliance that has been damaged by overheating. Overheating may be caused by the ventilation slots being blocked by other equipment, or the appliance may be next to something that generates a lot of heat. Appliances that are not fastened properly can pose a risk to the user. If it is possible for the user to get their hand inside, like here with this electric fire, you could get an electric shock. Finally, check that the mains cable cannot be pulled out. Firstly, unplug the appliance and gently tug the cable where it enters the appliance. If there's excessive movement, then there is risk that the cable might pull out. Step 3. Checking the outside of the plug. The third step in the formal visual inspection is to check the outside of the plug. Damage to a plug is quite common. This can happen if a plug or appliance is dropped, stood on, or an item of furniture such as a desk is moved against the plug. With constant use, it is quite common to see the cable start pulling away from the plug. This can be quite dangerous as it may pull the earth wire out, leaving a Class 1 appliance unearthed. Even more dangerous is the earth wire becoming free in the plug and curling around the plug to touch the live pin. This would cause the metal casing of the appliance to become live and give an electric shock to anyone touching the appliance. Bent pins on plugs, as seen here, is unacceptable, as it may result in causing further damage to the plug and the mains socket it goes into. All appliances sold, even used ones, must be fitted with a plug with sleeved neutral and live pins. There is no regulation that requires non-sleeved mains plugs to be changed to sleeve ones, but many companies do so during pat testing for added safety. Step 4. Checking the inside of the plug. The fourth step in the formal visual inspection is to check the inside of the plug. For all rewirable plugs, the user needs to check that the fuse is actually being used and hasn't been substituted with a piece of metal or screwed up tinfoil. This can result in a fire if the appliance were to develop a fault. The cable must not have too much insulation taken off the inner wires. Also check for loose strands of wire, as this can lead to shorting and is a fire risk. Use a screwdriver to check that the screws are tight and tighten any loose screws. If a wire is not held in place tightly, this can lead to overheating. Finally, check for any dirt or other foreign matter inside the plug and any signs of overheating. Here are examples of a correctly wired Class 1 and Class 2 plugs. Step 5. Checking the fuse. The fifth and final step of the formal visual inspection is to check the fuse. For full details on how to check whether the fuse used is correct, please refer to the Checking the Fuse video module. In summary, user checks and formal visual inspection are important stages in pat testing. It's important to make sure that the user knows what to look for. The formal visual inspection consists of 5 easy steps.